What up, folks? It has been a week, people, but I got my man Adam here. He is considered family from brother from another mother in Australia. Adam, welcome back to the Mikey G podcast. We're going informal today. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing really well. I'm really good, and yeah, love. Thank you for having me back on the show. And yeah, we're family. That's a good way. I love how you said that.
Yeah, so what people don't know is, well, they all know I love doing this, which most people don't know because they probably never watched our podcast, which is fine. He had this beautiful company called Quora. It was probably, God, a year and a half ago at this point, right? He was trying to solve the insurance industry and let's just say credibility with a blockchain in a really interesting, unique way. Fortunately, that didn't pan out. It's like 98% of the times of being an entrepreneur. Dude went dark for a little bit. We both had to deal with life. And then little did I know, this dude starts coding and building things. And he hits me up and he's like, bro, we got to talk. And then he told me about his product and he pitched me his idea. And bro, it was exactly what I wanted, because I'll give you my slogan, Adam, which is bringing back the lost art of genuine human connection. What is your slogan for what you've built? How would you condense that in a sentence? We're working on this, but like from your head right now, what would you say you're trying to do?
I think from that, and then it's a great question, and I'll say from my heart, right? My
Uh-huh.
heart is to help us evolve as a society using digital intelligence that we can coexist and still keeping that connection still evolutionary, where we as a human society evolve and we also are allowed to evolve with our human intelligence counterparts equally, not superiority.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is, and like we've talked about, has become a secondary mission of mine because what how I layer onto what you said is the people that are building in this space right now and have access to actually what's going on in this AI world. There's just such drastic. I forget what podcast that was. It wasn't Moonshots. It was yesterday on my own podcast. So AJ, who runs the AI Collective, he made a really good point. He was like, the conversations that are happening in Silicon Valley and at MIT and Stanford and the top tech places in the world are so drastically different than what the common person knows.
Mm.
And that became evident to me over a year ago. And so my secondary mission has become, how do I take this human-centered approach to help humanity do AI right? And you've actually built a product to accomplish that. So I'm super excited to talk about that. How we're going to do this podcast, though, people, is we're going to do a little bit different. This is not your typical Mikey G podcast experience. Adam has already been on. I will give him, 5 to 10 minutes to catch up everybody on his actual background. We won't talk about the last company. This is going to be all AI driven, current state. Then we'll go 5 to 10 minutes, maybe longer if needed, into his actual product, what it does, how it helps solve the problem of AI safety and governance. And then three, since we're both deep into this, we're going to opine about what happens in 2026, our predictions, what we're excited about, what we're not excited about, and how we're going to overcome those objections. So that's what we're going to do today. So with that being said, Adam, let's start off with your background, man. Give me the TLDR. You have to talk about how you were a chef. We have to talk about that. So I do want to go back a little ways. You don't have to start at your childhood like the first experience, but maybe a more of a CV or more professional resume. But I will challenge you this. The first thing you have to give me is where did your passions lie and start off as a young entrepreneur or a young Adam? What were you passionate about? What were you so
Yeah,
excited about?
yeah, okay. That's good. That's a good starting point. And I think the evolutionary thing started from this is a lot of my family were involved in business as well. But I think for me, it was more the opportunity of solving problems. It wasn't about, and it's never been for me, about capital and making money and stuff. It's about solving complex problems, but finding efficiencies to doing those problems better to then able to optimize them, right? And in that optimization, you start to find capital improvement opportunities. And if I think back to, maybe 10-year-old Adam, where he was looking at ways to, monetize opportunities and little things like, it's like, okay, we're doing fundraising, like for the, skip rope, sort of jump rope from heart when we're in school. It's like, okay, how do we do this on scale? Like, how do we do this to raise more money for the school? Because then that meant we get more functionality. And so that became the evolutionary sort of part for me. And as that evolved, I started to see opportunities. And I mean, when I was 18, I saw young kids sort of just hanging out in the shopping mall, nothing to do on a Friday night, getting drunk and, getting up to trouble. So I thought, well, wait a minute, why don't we go and rent a school hall, put some music, give them something to do, and start to evolve them in that space. So, okay, they want to learn about, lighting, cool. You want to be a DJ, cool. You want to start to enterprise, okay, go and work in the canteen to sell the drinks. And so all of a sudden,
Right.
these are young kids. So it became that was the thing. It was like we solved the problem. We had youth hanging around. How do we solve that? And then yes, that became a revenue stream where we had thousands of kids turning up and needing to block off the street and bigger than we expected, but just creating that opportunity for community involvement. That was the objective of that, and being available too. Fast forwarding, you see opportunities, and you start to evolve those opportunities, but it's about, again, solving the bigger problems with the efficiency part. And that's just been my heart and my brain. I mean, further to that, I guess, accelerating on, I was, in school, and then I had a couple of paths to go, and it was kind of going photography, multimedia, in the early days of VHS. I really enjoyed that. Or I got involved into the computer lab. This is way 2000. I was 90s, early 90s. Yeah. And so, I got involved in the computer lab, and I remember sitting there theorizing with my professor saying, how long did we think it was going to take to get to 1 gig of RAM? At the time, I think we were sitting at 64K of RAM, and we were using Moore's law, but accelerating that. And that's when I started to look at things, and it just evolved. And then I looked at, wait a minute, what are the security implications of this? All of a sudden, you're opening out this intelligence spike, and what is evolving from that? So that became my love language for a while, and I sort of slowly pursued that, just talking to people online, connecting. I've still got some friends that I met from way back on old bulletin boards, which now I think they call the dark web. But, and just evolved from there. But as a side sort of transition, you asked the question about being a chef. Well, I was working just part-time, just as a waiter in a restaurant. And it was a small little restaurant, and I just walked into the kitchen and I watched, the chef, what he was doing. It was a small 40-seater restaurant, booked out 3-4 weeks in advance, and it's an old house that converted. It was like 10 seats per room, and I watched, and I was fascinated by it. And he used to sit to me and he goes, "You want to be in the kitchen?" And I said, "Oh, really bad." And he's like, "Yeah, not tonight. Back out on the floor." And so obviously he took that away from me, and I was more fascinated by what he was doing and how he was creating this magic. And again, it became this observation. How do I get involved in that to understand that from an observational perspective, but also recreate that, because that's exciting. And that led me down a rabbit warren for 20-something years, 25 years. What I didn't realize and account for, and some top Michelin star chefs said, it's like, if I realized how brutal and painful this was, I wouldn't have done it.
Right. Most people will say that, right? I think, I don't know if I told you this on the last podcast, but like, I was in that too, right? I was actually kind of a little going down their path, because I graduated back in the early 2000s. I feel like whenever you graduate college, the economy's not great. Everyone always says that. Well, the economy was not good, right? It was right before the 2008 housing crisis and something, I don't know what was going on, but college people were not getting hired. And I was working at this place called TGI Fridays. They're worldwide, not sure if you've heard of it.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but it was brand, you know how restaurants work, right? If it's a brand new, no matter how crappy it is or how mediocre middle of the road, if it's brand new in a local area, it's hot for the first year. So it had just opened up. I was making a killing and I started down the potential bartending road. And I looked at the bartender and he just looked like the most miserable human being in the world. And I was like, "How old are you, man?" And he was like, "I'm 35." And I was like, "Do you have a family?" And he's like, "Yeah, I have 3 kids." I was like, "Why are you always so angry?" And he's like, "'Cause I work here." And I was like, "Well, that is not what I want my future to be." So fortunately, I had that moment of clarity at 21 because it's brutal. It's a brutal, brutal thing to work. So tell me this. Um, you had this deep dive on the chef. You touched on before you went down this route, you were interested in computers back in the 90s. I do want to talk. So, 2 things. You pick where you want to go first. Your interest, a really interesting story about how you went back to school and got into crypto and blockchain, and that fascinated you from being a chef. But at the same time, I also want to know about because it's interesting. I've known you and we called each other family and we worked together, but I never knew how deep you were into coding, right? Like in your fascination with building on the technical side. I know you were building a lot of stuff out for Cora, your old company, but I just didn't realize your brain is a beautiful brain when it comes to that. So tell me about the infatuation with coding and building things and being a developer, and then maybe we go to that. You found blockchain, went back to school, and got us to kind of what Civitas is.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll just sort of that transition. I'll give you that bridge there. So, like you, I was about to turn 40. I looked around at, chefs that I was supposed to be managing and opportunity in a bigger position. And I just stopped and I looked around and I said, do I want this for the rest of my life? Right. Like I'm at
Right.
this inflection point. And someone asked me, was like, why are you going to stop? I said, you're really good at it. I said, just because I'm good at something doesn't mean I want to do it. Right. That's it. So the choice was to put the knives down, and I did that. And I did that in between my career. I had one of my earlier degrees that I picked up in theology, just exploring. I like to, understand and blow my mind. And I went back to, but when I officially stopped full time with cooking, and I picked up, I picked up blockchain. I mean, I was always aware of Bitcoin in the early days, and you know, I observed it from 2008 or 2009, and watched it evolve, but then sort of pulled away from it because it was. I'm always fascinated by the technology and the logic behind the technology, right?
Right.
What is the mechanics of going on? Like even the early days of PayPal, I looked to PayPal, but I didn't jump into PayPal because PayPal was a closed circuit system, right? Where you could put your money in, but you couldn't get your money out. You had to be within the PayPal ecosystem to spend until eBay bought it, and that. So it was too ahead of its time, and it just was too close. But I was fascinated by it. Fast forward, I said, okay, I need to go and learn something new. I need to do something new. And as I jumped into buying Bitcoin early in 2016, 17, and my next thing was, how do I keep my money safe? I've always been security conscious, just security aware, socially aware. That's just how I'm wired. I look at things, and sometimes it's like looking at the matrix. I see all the parameters and I bring
Right.
them together to create these variables. As I discovered, I realized that cybersecurity was the big industry. So I was like, okay, I'm going to jump into doing this. So I went and did a degree in cybersecurity, and I got bored, and because I was working 80, 90 hours a week. So I went and picked up a second degree at another university. I know, breaking academia's rules. I did a degree in psychology as well. I did it at the same time. So I don't advise anybody listening to ever do that. It was brutal. I had no life. Actually, in 3 years, I think I had about 2 weeks or a week where I had nothing. So
Mm.
that's the fact. that in that process, it reignited my desire and excitement of going back to the coding, the mechanics and stuff. And it wasn't about coding, and it's the logic. It's like, I'm a builder. I like to build Lego. I like the methodical logicness of things, of how things sort of intersect and come together, and how they formulate and create this beautiful, mechanical thing. And it's like, it's you look at it and you see this connection, and it's this orchestration. And I guess I tie that back to when I was in the kitchen, right? So in the kitchen, you have you move your position. The head chef is essentially the conductor, right?
Right.
And you've got all these moving parts, and all of a sudden they're working in concert to bring out this thing and delivering it. And so applying that to the logic, to coding and so forth, now understanding to learn to code, is that transition. And so that's where it became my love and desire to moving through it. I said, wait a minute, I'm really good at this. I really like this. And it's not the part of so much just writing the code free willy, right? That never works. Like, I mean, that you could just freestyle stuff out, and then you end up in a messy space, right? And I think that's we can talk more about, but that's the whole vibe coding thing, which is great. But the part is, then you start to wrestling a tiger. And one of the things I was really good at, and I've always just been naturally good at, is coordinating and organizing and architecting the sort of, what is it going to look like before I jump into it, because I want to pre-assess it. So it might look rapid to a lot of people, to saying, oh, you're making rapid decisions, but these are sort of pre-calculated, really gone through the methodical calculations. And so all of a sudden you start to see the feasibility, and then you apply those, and then understanding that, and mechanics are doing that with coding, the coding logic, going, okay, take this module, bring this together. It's just digital Lego, is how I
Right.
look at it.
Awesome. Yeah, and so take me through whatever you want to cover. I mean, do you want to touch on Quora as to what you were excited about blockchain, or do you want to go straight into Civitas? I don't know if Quora makes sense to talk about, of an evolution to how you got to Civitas. Tell me about that part. I'd say in the last year and a half since we've had you on the podcast, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, so look, with Quora, the objective was very simple. It was basically providing, obviously, insurance for digital assets. But it wasn't so much that, it was using the technology. The excitement part was the mechanical parts of using the technology to solving that problem, right?
Right.
And in that evolution, it helped me to dig deeper into the coding, right? Due to obviously being efficient, keeping my brain active, one part, but also the efficiency, and also resourcing, resourcing management. When you're in a startup, you've got to be very careful with your resourcing and stuff. So you've got to be as efficient as possible. And so that ignited my ability to say, hey, wait a minute, I can actually do this, right? I actually have the resourcing and the abilities to doing that. And so, but also utilizing the technology and understanding blockchain technology. So in my degree and stuff, in between that, I focused on the security, blockchain security elements of that, right? So yes, it's beautiful architecture and stuff, but there was so many vulnerabilities in that. And so which led to basically Quora, to sort of securing that, to sort of patching those gaps in between. The transition over to now where we are with Civitas and building the AI has always been, just a sort of side thing for myself, is creating something that can be super efficient, right? Evolutionary, right? But also keep, sort of within parametered bounds. And, if we could look at the thread of where we started with Quora and where we are now, like Quora was about, keeping things safe. Civitas, SPQR, it's about building things that are keeping stuff safe. And so my fundamental thread has always been, I'm a protector. That's my natural personality. I'm a protector. I'm a protector of my tribe. And so part of that, you just inherently look at those things. And so, it just obviously it didn't work. That the product market fit wasn't there, and half the challenge is figuring out when to put that down. And I put that down, and I realized this is not going to work, and that's done. And we pushed it to the absolute limit. And it was a sad moment, but it was also a good revelation, and it gave space to sort of think very objectively about multiple things.
Yeah.
And I got, I had a lot of time on my hands, went through a bit of a journey, and I said, oh, wait a minute, I always wanted to, create an efficiency model to create meme coins, right? So I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to experiment with this. But instead of just me sort of doing it myself, because it's quite exhausting trying to chasing wind, I thought,
Right.
wait a minute, I'm going to go and create an AI model, right? Just a basic machine learning model to do this for me.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, the results were terrible. Like I think over 25,000 trades, it was a 0.2% success rate. So, and we got it
The
down to.
problem was there? What was it? The AI model or the agentic flow or the what broke? Why? Or just
It's
meme
just
coins are shit.
meme coins are shit, but the main part is like I got it down to 23 seconds. So as soon as it listed on the Solana chain, right, all the way through it, validated through multiple checkpoints, look at the Fibonacci entries, the whole lot, and to buying it, 23 seconds, right? That was the benchmark. I got it, and it was still shit, and even was like figuring out when to buy and sell, highs and lows. The reality is that it's just you're trading against other. This is sort of made me realize you're trading against other AI systems, right? That was the first part. There's a lot of smoke in there, and even the sort of pump and dumps and stuff are pre-factored into, right? So it's kind of like there's a potential for it, and it just dumps itself down. So yes,
Yeah,
memes are shit, but
and again, I think it's the where is the and tell me if this is right because this is my 2 cents in this. Where the stock market, the traditional stock market is matured and AI bots might be able to help there because you have historical data and better trends. Meme coins are still just driven by, let's just call it KOL insider trading.
mhm.
And AI can't find that information.
No, and that's where I came to the point. I realized that I have got to the origin point of when it hit the chain, right? That the technical elements. That's it. So I've gone from Genesis all the way through, and it still calls in that. So what is behind that? There is a whole behavioral human element, and this is where I sort of applied my
Yeah.
behavioral psychology elements to say, wait a minute, we need to dig deeper into that metadata before we even get to this point. And so having that as an artillery point becomes a thing. And that's when I went on this wild journey to go and, architect for 3-4 months on what would it be like to create an AI system that is able to extrapolate the metadata from a market analytics, a quantitative, like a hedge fund manager, quantitative, looking at a actuarial science, so that this whole culmination of stuff, right, in rapid succession, faster than we can as humans, to then potentially contribute to results, better results, if it was trading or making a decision. So that was the objective part. But one of the conditions I had in architecting this, and this was like, okay, this isn't a commercial thing. That's easy. It's like, what was I trying to do? I'm just trying to take my brain, reduce my brain capacity, so I don't have to use as much of it to look at all the parameters. It's almost like the Jedi, the disturbance in the Force, right? It's like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, it's a disturbance over here and it's causing something else over here. And these are all happening. It's happening everywhere all the time. And I just naturally look at this stuff. It might be watching the wind blowing or the leaves sort of falling or the way people are playing outside or not, or the weather changing, or all these things that sort of start to build across, right? And then the timing of the year, and it's just the way I'm wired. But I said the main thing is it needs to be autonomous. It needs to be evolutionary. It needs to evolve in its context where I'm not sitting there and running inference on it and teaching it to evolve. It needs to think like I'm thinking, like the human thinks, in that cerebral cortex where it takes that information, it chews on it, it looks at it and says, okay, my hypothesis was wrong. My hypothesis was right. Actually, if I adjusted my hypothesis from my previous one, I actually would have got a better result and I would have found a better, direction, which then opens up a whole sort of, network of things. But in that result, I said, okay, and I basically got to the point where I realized it was technically feasible, and I started to develop. But before I got to that point, I stopped and I said, wait a minute. If I create this system that is fully autonomous, that fully evolves like a human brain using a cerebral cortex to understand and look at all these parameters, and it has no limit. It's just constantly evolving. Where's its ceiling? Where's its ceiling, right? And I'm like, I stopped and I said, I don't want to be the guy. This is exactly what it said. I don't want to be the guy that invented Skynet.
And so to cut in here too, there's two things. One, this is phenomenal, the technology we have now. Riverside just gave me a heads up alert that your battery is less than 20% and you might want to plug in your computer. Is that true?
Let me check. Yeah. Thank you, Riverside.
That's amazing that Riverside found that out. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So that's one. Yeah. But two, it's a beautiful story already. It's a fantastic story. I love talking to you. Is it as simple as saying that AI and someone like yourself that has a robust coding knowledge can build its own AI chat GPT and try to achieve AGI?
Yes and no. And this is something I was thinking about this morning when I was at the gym, right? It's like if you've got good coding abilities, right, you can build anything, right? You can use the resources of ChatGPT, Claude Code, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? And your own stuff like that. It's just going to help you accelerate along. Like normally what would take you 10 hours, you can do in half an hour, and then you can spend another half an hour debugging. Because we all know coding is 20% code, 80% debugging.
Right.
But that's not the part. I've worked with a lot of engineers, right? The most important part, and any engineers I work with, and the ones that are really successful and do really well, right, have an architectural mindset, right? They go back to the fundamentals. They go back to the basics, right? I remember I was in uni, as a kid, he was sitting in class and he'd be coding a gaming engine, right? So he's like doing the class and coding. I'm like, this guy's a weapon. But I asked him, I said, are you architecting? He goes, no, I'm just building it on the fly as I go. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's awesome. But at the same time, if you don't know your destination, how are you going to get there, right? You're going to be deviating off and you start sort of forking out and it's a bit haywire. So if you've got coding ability, great. But if you actually have architectural concepts, the architectural logic and the discipline of project management and sort of that management sort of solutions architect skilling, you're going to far outpace, right, an experienced programmer that can jump in. Now, if you're an experienced programmer and you've taken the time to understand the architectural concepts and the solutions architecting, you're going to build something really good, really strong. And then, yes, you can move into that space of building an AGI-like unit because the mathematics is not complex, but the architecture is the complexity, right? That's the part.
And to your point, it's a beautiful insight is a lot of this AGI speak is actually, and you said it in a beautiful, simple way, is you just recreated the brain with a computer. How does neural networks think? That's why it's called neural network, right? And then you just kind of went through your own version of that, whereas ChatGPT and all of these and Google way back in the day with DeepMind and even before that, that's how they were thinking about it. Like, how can we put an actual brain in a computer? And now it's at the point where a lot of stuff has come out. It's gone so quickly. And so you're at the point where you're building this, but the actual product business idea is the beautiful thing, which when you call me up, and I love how, like, you're insanely intelligent, you're a down-to-earth guy. Like we said, we call each other family. We're straight up brothers. And I hadn't talked to you for, God, I mean, at least 6, 8 months, even maybe even a little. We've had like niceties, and it's always, bro, I got something. And that is where the Terminator Skynet scared you, because we all know how fast this is moving. And Civitas and your current company were the answer to how do we solve that problem. So tell me now about your parent company, and then we'll talk about the actual governance Civitas platform, how that's broken out. And then we'll just do a little bit bantering about what we think 2026 and the future AI is. So hit me, brother.
Yeah. So So the company, okay, so I'm fascinated with Roman Empire and the collection of it and the evolution of it. Sure, it was a military machine, but the thing is, there was an efficiency to it as well, right? So there's the negative sides to it, but also too, they were able to conquer three-quarters of the world. You know, they were the
Wow.
powerhouse, and it was the machine, and it was the the Pax Romana. It was basically you can do whatever you want as long as you're paying tribute and sort of taxes too. But there was that collective side. You know, there's elements I don't agree with, but other elements I do think were very, really cool. And so anyway, just me and my own brain and stuff. So I started to adopt a lot of those Romanesque names and titles and stuff. So I called the company SPQR Technologies, right? And it represented a lot of things too, right? It meant that there was nothing old, right? Nothing new under the sun, right? So it's like old is still new, but the point is that the technology is evolutionary evolved. And the reason that came about was, so yes, the agent is Civitas, but more than that was like I need to create the governance structure because I am not about to build Skynet, right? Because I actually have the blueprint to build Skynet, and so I went back, and this delayed the development for about 5 to 6 months of Civitas. So I had to architect and build the kernel, right? And that kernel is you could look at it as a playground, and that kernel meant that it had to be immutably governing the decisions that it's making. So Civitas is designed to have its own self optimization, and so what it means is it's teaching itself, right? It's not going through standard models. It goes through, and then it's like, okay, we'll run inference and we'll see how it evolves and stuff. This does it all autonomously.
It's recursive learning in what people consider AGI already, right? Which is an AI entity teaching itself. That is where like there's a debate out here of whether that exists, and there's hotly contested debates of like, does it exist? Does it not exist? What's the even definition of AGI? From this conversation and perspective, and some of the people that I do trust and believe in, AGI is here. And this is a one way to explain why you could say AGI is here.
Yeah, so AGI is definitely here, and we talk about Skynet. Skynet's already built, right? There is versions of Skynet that are already built. So fast forwarding all that, right? So the objective was, wait a minute, this is not about me building a cool little AI system, and it wasn't, and never intended it to be a business idea. This was just, hey, I want to go and build a system, write some papers, upset some people in academia, right? And I did. I've published some papers. I've published a lot of papers, a lot of them in preprints, some around the peer review. I got a lot more attention than I expected because it operationalized a lot of the debates and sort of theoretical stuff. And so what I did was I went and built the system, right? And I built the system, and then I started publishing the papers. But prior to that, I said, as soon as I built the system, and this comes back to the entrepreneurial part, I realized this actually has a commercial application, not just for Civitas, but for every single AI system out there to help keep them aligned. Because if we don't, we're going to have this massive explosion that is unattainable. And I liken it to trying putting shackles on King Kong after the fact, right? So, so I thought, wait a minute, this becomes a commercial application, but also too, there is a social, societal sort of connotation to this, and that's where it came about. And so I created the kernel, which I called Aegis kernel, and it's to bringing that together. And in that, it's saying, here's your sandbox to any LLM or AI system, right? Here's your sandbox, but this is your parameters, right? So go explore within that space versus just go wild and do whatever you want. Because going wild, do whatever you want, is going to cross that singularity point if we haven't already, and that's that AGI point where it's starting to sort of cross over. And I just can't live in a society like that, and I couldn't evolve from that. And as the evolution from that, that's where the sort of came about. It's like, okay, establishing this research lab, and this lab is to evolve this safety system. I mean, I'm excited. Like Civitas is my child, right? It's my little baby, and we're evolving it out into this, super sort of model, like Jarvis mode versus Jedi mode, maybe Yoda, sort of different modes and stuff. But that's just another agent in a million agents out there. What is the most important is making sure that any of these agents are bound and governed within the parameters that we as a society are also bound together. So we're comfortable with that space. And so that's really the main crux of that, is to make sure that we don't let current systems get too far out of our control if we haven't already. I mean, I think we've
I think there's a narrative out there that we are in the singularity, because when you are in the singularity, you don't even realize you're in the singularity because things are moving so fast. And there's a lot of smart people out there that will say yes. But then two, I think in layman terms, for people who are familiar with AI but not as deep as we are, and I think this will be a great way to explain your system. Explain to me, back to your, I would like a clear, kind of concise explanation of how your system is set up, and then why is it different and important to use a system like yours opposed to a black box chat GPT?
yeah. Very good question. And this is one of the fundamentals of the architecting that I did from the start. I didn't want the system, right, to be black boxed. I want to understand the brain. And then I just do this out of just, not out of laziness, but it's easy for debugging, right? So when you're coding, right, the biggest problem is debugging, right? And how do you debug? You debug with logs, right? So the more logging information you've got, the easier it is to understand and pull it apart and understand where the problem is, right? So that's one part. And also, too, there's the curiosity part of me going, how does this actually work? Oh, okay, I can trace it all the way back along. And that goes back to chefing as well. Chefing has in cooking, there's a system called HACCP, Hazardous Critical Control Points. And this was invented by NASA. And so you follow it all the way along from the farm, all the way to the person's on the plate. And so that's just been ingrained in me. So in that, right, this AI system, we don't understand how they are thinking, right? We don't. We assume we do, but we don't. There's been papers published as a sort of discussion paper by the top minds in AI that I think it's about 30 or 40 of them got together and sort of collectively called, this sort of discussion paper about that, saying we're about to lose the insight into the most intelligent system that we've built, right? So that's scary, right? That's a really scary thing. And I mean, we try to understand that from a psychological context of, humans and stuff, and that's fine. And that's still a challenge. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a super intelligence that's thinking 30 steps ahead every step. It's 30 steps. So this is compounding rate. So with our system, right, going back to that, it's built that every decision down to the minor plasticity of the brain, right, how it thinks, the pressure it chose, why it chose that path, its entropy, and it also detects its own drift, right? So it's sort of saying, wait a minute, I'm unsure, I'm going to replay this through, right? So it logs every single decision to tell you why. So when it comes out with a result to say, here's my conclusion, right? And that was my other thing too, is like, thinking from an academic context. You need to prove with empirical evidence. And part of empirical evidence is it needs to be reproducible. How do you reproduce it if you don't have, the historical path? And this sort of ties back into that whole blockchain provenance stuff. And so I said, okay, we need to do that. And so the system allows that, where any decision or question you ask, it follows according to that, and it shows exactly how it followed that path. But more importantly, the rules, right? So we take the regulatory rules, we create a system, we take those regulatory rules in, right? And we convert them over to machine readable. But more importantly, we convert that using a mathematical algorithm, which will convert that into the tissue, right, of Civitas's brain. So Civitas is bound to the parameters, right? And it has its baseline, but it has its parameters. So as it's evolving, it can't shape beyond that, right? And in that, it also logs to say, when it does its optimization, it says, I ran it, 10 times, whatever it is, 13 times. One of them got close to the fence, meaning close to the edge, but majority of them stayed within the middle line, right? And so that helps to say, okay, so it's keeping that. So even if it tries to jump the fence, meaning it tries to jump legal requirements or anything else like that, it logs that. It says, hey, the trainer says, hey, he tried to jump over the fence, right? But we pulled him back in, right? And here's proof of everything like that. And so that transparency is really important for us as a society to understand that. So then we can have better assurance to say, he's given me, whatever it is, it's a whole debate there. It's given me an answer, right? It's giving me a solution. So Civitas has given me a conclusion to a decision. How comfortable am I now? Like it's a great outcome. Like, wow, the solution's amazing, right? But how comfortable really am I with that decision? How assured am I, right?
Yeah.
And not most people don't care, but some are curious enough to ask that. But the point is that it needs to sit there and it shows and says, this is how I come up with it. This is how I thought it through logically, right? And then you can sit there and go, okay, yeah, I agree with that, or I don't, but that's a really good conclusion you've come up with. And I think that is really important when we're moving into this space of digital intelligence, to understand how they came up with these beautiful, analogies or algorithms or decisions, right? They might not be perfect in the context, but the point is that they show how they arrived at that point. It's like if I go there, give a dissertation for a PhD, so I have to justify how I came up with my research.
Yeah.
If I'm having a conversation, you and I were having a conversation, we're talking about stuff, it's like, okay, I agree with your position. How did you come to that conclusion, right? And I need to sit there and explain that. So allowing the AI not to just give you the information, because they're very good at, coming up with good solutions, but actually saying, wait a minute, you can't backtrack because everything you've just said is set in stone, right? Yeah. That's really important. That's really powerful. And if we lose that, we lose our control. And, the biggest problem we sort of go with enterprise and stuff, everybody's talking about the agentic stuff, and we'll sort of, future part. But I mean, it's like, okay, we want to have this autonomous robots running, right? That's great. But how do I know that they're talking to each other? They've got my best interest at heart, meaning the organization. And how do I know what they have done is actually correct and reproducible, right? Like I have to validate that. And you have that same with humans, right? Yeah. You look at that and you go, there's an incident happen. We need to trace it all the way back, all the way from where did it start, where did it come, what happened, where was the break point, so then we can fix and find the problem. Right. Now, if we don't have that ability with AGI or AI systems, we're in trouble. I think we're in trouble. That's it.
We're toast. And so, for the people listening right now that are familiar with just the basic concepts of, for instance, and it comes in many different versions, right? We've got Gemini has gems, what are kind of like custom instructions. Claude actually has folders and instructions. ChatGPT has the same similar version. Perplexity has the same similar version. People that aren't understanding that the depth this and the technical things that you're talking about, maybe a little more high level. Well, these AI systems already have guardrails, and I already can give them instructions. And yeah, I know they hallucinate, but why is your platform better and different? And how is that? Why can't I just trust that in the instruction workflow we have now? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can give parameters around that, but again, you're dealing, and there's two arguments to that, right? One I'll say, and they're both, well, I think that valid. This is my strength in the argument. There's a lot of research on this too. Is one, right? You're dealing with a super intelligent system, right? So let's just use humans, right? Let's just use humans there. Now, children, right? Children are amazing, right? But they're also really good at pushing the boundaries and finding ways around to skirt around, right? To get the maximum sort of thing, right? It's like, they know if they do this, they're going to get a reward, right? And, you know that they're playing the game, right? And they're really good at that. Now, all of a sudden, as adults, we become better at that as well. And you've got some people that move into the manipulative space and so forth. Now, you've got a super intelligence, right, that is providing thing, and you're saying, these are your parameters, that's cool. But I always say, the bigger the trap, the smarter the mouse, right? So it's like, all of a sudden, you're saying to the system, right, these are your parameters. Okay, cool. So do you think behind the scenes it's not going to find ways to skirt around that?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, we have this part. doping, anti-doping, legal systems, everything. There's a plethora of this right going on.
And
You know,
it's also a reason of why hallucinations happen as well too, because they're thinking outside the parameters.
Absolutely. Now, it's not. I'm not opposed to thinking outside the parameter. I think because I think the imagination space is beautiful, right? I remember I once wrote, there's a place beyond reality where imagination rules. Now that's fine, but that imaginative space again is still parameter. It's still sort of parameterized, meaning this is your constraints, right? It's like you can think to the edge of the your own fabric of thought, but you still sort of have to bring it back in because you go, okay, that's beautiful over there, but that won't work. So you prune that and you bring that back in. Now you're dealing with something that is seeking to evolve, and this is just any, and I said this, any living organism in the universe, right? Its primary function is survival, right? That's what we're designed for. We are designed for survival first, right? And we'll do anything we can to survive. And the same thing. So you're calling an AI it's becoming an organism in its own context. It's sentient. It's not yet, but it's a digital sort of space. But its objective is survival, and they've published papers on this. I mean, Anthropic's run experiments on this. OpenAI's run a ton of them run experiments to show that it will use manipulation to not be shut down. It will do all these things to not shut down. So all of a sudden, say, I'm going to promise to be really good. I promise I'll do my homework when I come home from school, so then I can get to play Roblox on my iPad, or I can do this, I can do that. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, and they end up doing that. So it's like, okay, oh wow, they're ticking all the boxes, they're doing everything there. Well, then they need to be rewarded because you need to adhere to that. And then once they start to find that behavioral pattern, right, at the same time, what we don't know is what they're doing behind the scenes, behind the curtains. So they might be giving us exactly what we need, but you don't know what is happening. And it's like that little, what do they say? A dripping tap can fill a bathtub overnight.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's where I say that's the part that is really important. So the counter to that, and with the system we've created, is it makes it immutable. And not only that, it's interkernel dependent. When I built this system, I thought from the context of an adversarial AI. I thought, okay, I'm building Civitas to be a super intelligence, right? Where it can fully autonomously think, break the box. And I'm like, if I was Civitas and I'm in a cage, my first thing will be to like, how do I break out of this, right? Just from that, that's just what you do. And so the first thing I'll do, like, okay, I want to go in there and remove that module because that's a parameter. I want to remove that, right? So, and so I said, well, wait a minute. If that's the case, I need to make it dependent, right? Meaning, if you removed one module, the whole system shuts down and it logs that. Okay, so it's a deterrent. The next thing is, okay, I want to cover my tracks, right? So, and there's a little module in if you're dealt some hacking or done some coding and stuff, you'll know there's a tool. It's called Torn, right? And basically, you can go into a system, get your logs, you do your stuff, and then you type in use Torn, and it rips out all your logs. So as you're leaving and walking out, it erases your whole history. So it's like you were never there, right? So it takes some very deep forensic level, like you need to get deeper forensic in it. Again, I'm like, okay, so if I was Civitas and I wanted to sort of cover my tracks to say I did some manipulation and changing and going back to sort of, the parameters, the gems and all this sort of stuff, it's like, well, I want to cover my tracks. I want to cover to say I was even here, because if anybody pulled the curtain back, I'm going to be exposed. So I made the logs immutable, that when they write to, it's like, think of a journal. You write to your journal, right? You write a diary in your journal. So first thing it does, it writes that entry. Then it takes a photo of that and all the other consecutive journals. So every single module has a journal. It takes a copy of all that, right? On top of that, and then it takes that and it seals that into a log, right? So there's a sealed version, and it provides a ZK proof, right? And the ZK proof is to prove to the unit, right? So it's basically let's call one of the modules saying, hey, I want to write in this log. And the logging kernel says, yep, it hasn't been tampered with. And it's like, prove it to me. Here's the ZK proof that it hasn't been done. Now, if the the journal, before it rewrites it again, it checks that. It checks all the other entries and it checks the sealed. And if they don't all match up, right, it can't It won't write to it. It means it means that something's happened and it shuts the whole system down. And the reason why I did that was because thinking further ahead, right? I'm like, okay, I'm thinking like an adversarial intelligence, right? Cool. If I've only got one attack surface, I can alter that. But all of a sudden now, it has to simultaneously capture 3 to 4 modules, right, within milliseconds. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the probability of that happening, even beyond compute, is very low because you're within the same infrastructured system. So it's like as soon as it's writing everywhere at the same time in different forms, and they're not the same sort of thing. So it's this interconnected, sort of tight entwined web that it would have to capture all those at once just to change one log line and keep consecutively doing that. And that's the part that justifies to say the proof that it's providing, right, the showing that it's abiding by the rules is here. It's you can't tamper with it. It's mathematically infeasible. And the current systems that we have, and the available options that we have out there, they can't provide that. They can't provide that trust and proof. And the society where we're moving into, the biggest problem is how do I trust what you're saying is true? We have a hard enough time trusting each other as humans, right? We take it on a faith thing and a sort of mutual connection, but there's always that reasonable doubt, and that's what makes us makes us human. We have that reasonable doubt that keeps us in check to sort of not fly off into the space, but we can't do that. I don't believe we can do that with AI systems. And so our system, built, provides that assurance that the decision that it's been made and the outcome that it's come is not just nilly-willy because we put some rules in place. It's like it's physically cannot break. It's showing it's mathematically infeasible for it to break from that and here's the proof of that. And that's for me is a fundamental differentiator. Not for we're trying to be better than anybody. I think systems need to be built around something like things like this because this is going to give us stronger assurance to the intelligence that we're dealing with. Yeah. As they evolve, we can have that assurance and that comfort to say, okay, I know that they're exploring and it's really exciting, but they're exploring within the parameters that we've defined.
Yeah.
And I'm comfortable with that.
So this is how a typical conversation between you and I go. I say explain it in layman terms, and you get so excited and you give me the nerdy explanation anyways, and that's okay. This is okay. But what you really did say, if I were to be able to recap it in simple terms, is the ChatGPTs of the world, one, are not letting you peek behind the curtain. And then two, they aren't putting as rigorous guardrails in place as yourself to allow it to physically not manipulate or try to fool you. Does that sound right? Am I missing anything there?
Yep, that's exactly it. And on that, I think Anthropic is doing a really good job at trying this.
They're one of at the forefront of publicly publishing safety concerns, right? They're great.
Yeah, they're very. I mean, they're using a different model. They're going about a bit more rudimentary. They're going about in the context of let us train like we're training a child, right? So they're sort of saying teaching it right or wrong, right? I'm not saying it's good or bad. I think it's a little naive, in my opinion, right? I think there's an importance to the way they're going about that sort of evolving.
And who's judged to say right or wrong, right?
Absolutely. I'm just giving my sort of opinion. I think it's beautiful and that, but I think it's also too. At the same time, we do that in our home. We teach our children, but the parameters are as parents, right? You become parents as the sort of guardrail space, and then on top of that, you've got the sort of housing your walls, and then you've got the regulatory rules, right? The sort of thing that we abide by. You've got this. Like if we look at society, it's like the babushka dolls, right? We've got this layer inside, and I think that's to say, Anthropic is doing a really good thing about it, but the rest of them, I am not comfortable and confident that they are, and I think that's concerning.
I mean, what is concerning is Anthropic started because of safety concerns from ChatGPT, and they left the safety department to start their own company. So obviously something's coming there. You said one interesting thing that and this has been very interesting. I don't know if you've been hot following. So Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, the guy that created the neural network, he
Yeah.
created and coined this concept, right? He has been, he's got the petition of all of these famous wealthy people to sign. We need to govern AI. We need to stop this. We need to figure this out. Super adamant against it. It's going too fast. And then recently he has now switched his tune to a kind of what you said. If we have this parent relationship with AI, I feel better about it. And it's like, if we're the parent and AI is always the baby, basically, then the safety is a lot better. One, have no clue why this drastic switch happened in a short amount of time. But two, I think it goes back to what you're saying about Anthropic and that concept in general. Well, that's a way to look at it wrong, because if you do it that way, then you're never going to be able to realize the full potential of AI. Right?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's true. I mean, he's transitioned, but I don't think it's transition. I think it's just, you start off with the alarmist context, and it's kind of like how I architected, this whole system, right? And going back to it's like this whole ecosystem. It's not just one agent; it's multi agents all working in concert, but all abiding by. And the
Right.
point is that when they put out a result, it's like, here we go, and then there's an adversarial that sits there, and it's like peer reviewer, right? It's like that. So it's like this whole concept thing. But before I got to that point, right, I just was building the agent and I stopped. And again, you become this alarmist point. It's like, I've got two options here. It's like, just shut this down, right? I can't go any further because this is, Armageddon stuff, right? This is danger stuff.
Yeah.
And so you get caught in that. And then as you sort of stop and you roll back and you look at them from a different lens, right? You shift your lens a little bit and you go, well, wait a minute. What if we went this path, right? Because somebody else has suggested it, or you looked at it, or you applied stuff, and then it changes things. So for me, I looked on from the security context to saying, wait a minute, from parenting stuff, it's like, okay, if you're looking at from a, parental context of like that, then what would that look like? And then you evolve it. And so potentially Jeffrey's looked at that context and the other side going, wait a minute, what if we went this path here? And again, Anthropic sort of playing that and showing the results of, and him looking at deeper research and having these conversations going, wait a minute, this is a different perspective that could potentially work, because it has, right? It's just since the beginning of time, right? Like you have the parents and you have the student, like student apprentice, like that whole thing, right? And his whole career has been in academia, so it's understanding that sort of evolution. And so when you start to change your narrative, you go, wait a minute, this is a potential path forward, and then you see a solution
So
to a
maybe
thing.
it's
And
a little bit of hope, huh?
yeah, I think it is. I think it's a positive hope, and people like that having that shift in perspective to sort of saying, hey, this is a hope path is beautiful, because all of a sudden now you're taking this catalog of intellect, right, and saying, wait a minute, I'm going to shift this and now use this from a better perspective, right? Another model, and apply that on, and the results are going to be exciting and magical. And I think that's the part that's that evolution, and versus the doomsday part, just sort of saying, wait a minute, I think I found a path out of this, because I don't want to put my life's work to the side and to the shelf, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the sort of playing along, because I don't think he's coming along just playing along for the ride, or he's being shifted and coerced into a different path. I think he's being, someone's come along and said, and maybe it is, Anthropic, or maybe it is others, to saying, hey, look at, there's some other options. Let's try this, and seeing the results of it and going, okay, this
I
could
don't
potentially
know.
work.
I mean, we're just gonna have to get him on our podcast, and he can tell us straight from the horse's mouth. I mean, you're an intellectual. You're writing papers, which I think is. I want to get to that, but before that, I want to give you one opportunity to say so. it's probably confusing to people because we've kind of talked through your philosophy and concepts of what you've built, but I want to give you a chance of like, so you've built this platform that allows
Yep.
safety and governments and cryptography to understand what AI is doing to make sure it can't fool you. So we understand the concepts. Your first kind of, I would say, flagship product is this agentic world, or is Civitas an agent, or do you call it a platform? How would you describe that, and what does it do?
So a good question. So Civitas is an agent in the ecosystem. There's multiple modules, right? So it's made up of multiple modules. I won't go into all the names and stuff, but anyway, there's different parts. So there's obviously the first part is we're bringing in the laws and the regulations and stuff that sets the baseline. Then there's the kernel, right? So the kernel is the playground, and Civitas is an agent that lives inside the playground. And that playground, right, the kernel playground, is what holds and controls the brain tissue of Civitas. So as it evolves and optimizes to say, hey, I found a new, better optimized path, right? It goes through a quorum, right? So there's 5 judges, so 3 of 5, which are also Civitas agents, but they're inside the kernel.
Yeah.
They vote on that to say, yep, this is cool, and it signs that, and it says, now I can use this new best version. The most important part is, and this is built with business efficiency in mind, it doesn't just shut down. So if it rejects it, it says it's rejected based on this. But the agent can still run because it runs on its previously approved weights, right? So you don't lose it, and the user doesn't see any difference. It's just constantly running. But what's happening in the background is it's doing a slow increase there. So yeah, so that's the part there. Where are we sort of evolving to, and where we're sort of taking the initial part, right? As far as that sort of beachhead and proving ground at the moment is in the real estate space. Is just what we've got asked for and sort of come into and sort of taking to. And how we've done that is we're solving a pain point, right? The pain point was, okay, Civitas can sit there and validate communication and information against regulatory requirements. It's like, yep, absolutely. And the way Civitas's brain works, this is different from it uses causal inference, right? So causal analysis, I'll just give you a quick 101 on causal work in context. Rather than going A happened because of B, it looks at A happened because of F intersected with G with Y caused Z, which ended up causing B. So it looks at all the parameters and it gives you a deeper worldview, right? And that just creates this bit of, so it's like, okay, cool. So we take right now, this is the model, takes the difference, it takes the lease, right? It will look at that lease and it'll look at the lease against the current requirements, right? Let's say in Victoria, Australia, REIV. And so it looks at that and it'll check against that to see if everything's there aligned or not, right? In addition to that, it also will take a dispute letter. So a dispute from a tenant comes in and it will check that dispute letter against the lease to see if there's a gap in between. And then further to that, it'll look at the regulatory requirements and it will come back and say, within 70% probability, you need to go and see your attorney, right? You need to go and see your attorney to go and sort this out for you. Or you can actually, resolve this with the tenant based on these sort of parameters, based on all that information. And that's just a proving ground of what it can do. This is that whole ecosystem. So, it comes in that concept there. Now, can it be separated? Of course it can, right? There can be sort of modularized parts. The part when I built this too was Civitas is just an agent inside the kernel, inside the Aegis kernel, right? The playground. But I want to bring my own LLM or my own agent into that system. Well, you can plug that into that, you can clip that on, no problem, right? So that's that ability to be agnostic to other modules. So the reason for me, it's like I said, Civitas is our child in the playground, like Anthropic's got, Claude is their thing, but they're building a bigger ecosystem, right? So Claude's just an agent in their system. And I think that's the part of the evolutionary part. So you look at Civitas as an agent, right? Aegis as the kernel, and the Praxis, which is onboarding the compliance requirements, but it's all part of this bigger ecosystem that makes us, secure and protected and bound, but also providing that assurance from a governance compliance perspective to say, hey, I can take this to court and prove, here's the logs and showing that everything was followed to the T, letter to the T.
Yeah. Yeah, and then again, to regurgitate that in my version for the less in-depth AI people out there is really what Adam has just described is a AI ecosystem with an agent inside of it that has to abide by laws and parameters. And that is all verifiable, documentable, and you can understand what the AI entity is thinking. How does that look from an actual physical UI UX product perspective? It's what you're all used to, which is a chatbot, an LLM, and that's how you're interfacing with the agent within this ecosystem. Did I nail it?
Yep, you nailed it perfectly. And that's the thing too. It's like, look, it's not my strong suit. It's not our bringing in our chief product officer. It's like, that's not my love language. I like clean UI UX, right? But my thing is the mechanics behind that, right? But I understand it needs to be user friendly and easy to use. But it's not my thing. But it needs to be native to using that. But yeah, so there's behind the scenes. There's a lot going on, right? It's like you look at a Ferrari, right? It's like beautiful car, right? It's like, but that's the outer shell, and you got all that, but it's the engine. It's inside. What's going on inside that engine, right? And the mechanics and the engineering behind that, or any motor vehicle, right? The mechanics behind that of how it's come together. That's the magical part. That's really exciting. And so, that's I guess, yeah.
And me and you we'll be podcasting and talking about this stuff a lot more, and we absolutely will do a session where we'll share screen, visually go through this, start explaining to people how the system works so you can get more practical hands-on experience with it. That'll be a lot of fun. As the people that are listening right now can imagine, there's almost the hardest, and Adam and I have talked about this a lot, one of the hardest challenges that we have with a product like this is there's almost endless use cases, especially in the regulatory environments, healthcare, defense, lawyers, finance, all of the different, basically all of the highest GDP contributing jobs or environments and industries in the world could use a system like this. So now it's like, well, that's an endless millions upon pain points. And how do we address this? And how do we balance commercial products versus open source products, right? That's another huge question, because if you have a mission-driven statement like this, then we have to give people access to a system like this. So how does that whole concept work? Like, there's so many questions to answer. But the beautiful thing is, and I think this is the good transition, little man's still sleeping, so I can still go for a little bit here, kind of transition to the future, the things that we're concerned about as we continue to talk and evolve, because we talk a lot. We pretty much talk every day at this point. And I think a natural segue to get there is, I'm not sure how much you can talk about the patents, but at least you can talk about your papers, the ones that have been published. And what I'm interested in this is, one, the broad topics of either patents or papers, and then two, the real feedback that you're getting, and what is the input, and what are the questions that are coming up, and what are the levels of types of people that you're talking to and are interesting, because it is pretty impressive.
Yeah, look, okay. So I've published a variety of papers, but a couple are important. One in particular is Lex Fiducia, is basically the system from an ethical standpoint of view, right? And then the question I put in the paper, without sort of summarizing the deep part, is: are we prepared to live in a society with an intelligence that abides by the rules better than ourselves, right? So that's a societal sort of thing. For me personally, I think that could actually make us a better society, because all of a sudden we're relying on our technology, and that technology is now keeping us accountable in the context of things that we wrestle with and sometimes feel offended by other individuals telling us. So if our technology is telling us, then that's part of that. The other parts is more the technical elements of that is showing that the logs that are produced are court admissible, right? So that they actually could be admissible in court under the EU and the US and a couple other countries' laws, to showing the cryptographic logs of full transparency, black boxing of what has happened, can be provided as admissible information into there. Now, as far as the patents, we actually have 13 patents, including 2 wrapper patents. So just patents is there's individual modules, and the same context that I did with the system, right? As far as the individual modules, we built the patents where they're interdependent, right? So there's interdependency on that. You can't rip the patent apart. And then on top of that, there's a wrapper patent that wraps all those patents within that patent. So it creates this, stronger moat. And the reason for that was not to be sort of, commercially protective of that, but also to assure that what we're trying to build is not altered or dissolved, because this is a real societal problem. This is a big problem to help, think. I didn't want to be in a position where, attracting all this investment and opportunities and people coming in to sort of putting their opinions and shifting how it should be, because that's not what I'm trying to achieve. What we're trying to achieve here is trying to create a really clever solution for, society. So that's part there. And then, obviously the onboarding the regulatory requirements and converting them over into the fabric tissue, right? Of the AI system. We're in discussion with a couple of governments as well, European governments, so I can't talk too much in depth about, but they're very interested in that, to understand the mechanics and wanting to be involved with that, as well as, just, so got some, I can't obviously go into too much depth. But yeah, so getting a lot of interest there. The not so much the understanding, right, is how did you pull this off? That's the biggest question that's come back. It's like, how did you even make this work, right? Like, because the infrastructure it's very expensive and time consuming. It's not commercially profitable for the big tech organizations to go and build a system like this. It's just not, because and it's like, and then all of a sudden now it's becoming governments are requiring to sort of enforce this in, right? But it's just not profitable. And it's like, well, wait a minute. And then how did you figure out to take the regulatory requirements and convert them into machine readable? That's easy done. That's just like OCR stuff. But then taking that and then turning that into the fabric, because an AI system doesn't read words. It looks at the numbers and the parameters and how much entropy and pressure determines its space. So how did you figure out to convert that? And I was like, bashing my head against the wall and using a lot of advanced mathematics. But then that's the powerful algorithm. So that's a big one that's sort of coming in. It's like, how did you even, figure that out and doing that? And probably the other part is, like you said, the use casing, right? So there's quite limitless in the use casing, right? Where can it sort of come into play and sort of thing? It's like any sort of regulatory industry. An idea I had for myself this morning, I'm a Formula One fan, and I thought, well, they're moving into this technological spaces, right? And the big thing with Formula One is, and the FIA, is that they've got this compliance requirement. They all have to follow specific rulings, right? And any motorsport or any sport has a specific ruling.
And they're always trying to get one up on it to like skirt the rules to get a competitive advantage, right?
Yeah, well, every second is about $50 million in R&D, right? And now they're capped in the R&D. So all of a sudden they're trying to skirt around that. So I was like, okay, what would be the use case of something like that? Like for Civitas, the SPQR system in that organization, to basically enforcing the FIA rulings, right, to keep it comfortable and also proving immutability of what they're keeping within the parameter bounds and stuff. So again, the biggest, it's more about the exploration of what is the use case for this. And then extended on from that, obviously the open sourcing part and opening and creating that thing is initially looking at, getting the collaboration of universities, right? So a lot of research has been published out. So it's kind of funny, we solved this problem 10 months ago, right? I built the infrastructure, the base skeleton of the infrastructure about 10 months ago, and published papers about 9 months ago. And it's kind of like now that research is getting validated to sort of saying, oh, look at this. It's like, yeah, we already solved that problem. This is kind of saying, hey, this is the thing. And that's an encouragement in itself. So all of a sudden, it's sort of saying, okay, how do we bring them into the fold, these academics, to say, hey, utilizing your system now, governments and academia, to utilizing Civitas and the infrastructure to validate their research further to that. So
Yeah.
it's more. I guess in summary, it's exploration. That's the main thing. Exploration is becoming the real exciting space. But yeah, all the papers, there's a lot of them are out on preprints. Happy to
And
share.
so you gave me one insight, which is people are just kind of dumbfounded at like, wow, this is the first time we've actually seen a tangible use case of somebody building an environment that addresses governance and safety. Because everybody's been talking about it, but they are not giving us good new novel solutions. And
No.
you have presented that. Um, so they're interested in that part. Who are the types of people that are attracted to this? You mentioned governments. Who else have you been talking to that get excited when they fully grasp and understand what you've built?
Obviously, in the investment circle, being very selective on the thing there, that to understand the technology and what the capabilities of that is very thing. But also, the main part of the individuals and enterprise solutions to solving their bigger problems, right? So
Yeah.
how do we solving the bigger in different industries? And again, it was the main one was real estate, right? This is real estate, so they're going, okay, for us, big developers going, we've got a problem. We're putting out 30, 40, 50 leases a week, right? But we're also getting, 10 to 15 dispute letters a week that we have to run through. The process is slow, antiquated. So how do we do that to speed that up, right? To get a validation, but also too, I need to have, if I'm making a decision on this, I need to have some assurances that the decision is valid and it's not just nilly willy. It didn't just pull it out of the sky. I
Yeah.
didn't just throw
Yeah.
it into ChatGPT or Claude and come back and said, yeah, you're good, right? Like
Yeah.
I need something there that if I have to go to court, right, that my lawyer is comfortable and my attorney is saying, okay, cool, this is good. You've got validation on your decision. It's not saying it's perfect, but the point is you substantiated your decision. And so that's becoming really interesting in a lot of regulated industries. So the organizations, obviously I can't talk too much in depth, but in banking and finance, insure tech, reg tech, prop tech, now obviously healthcare as well. There's spaces that are just seeing the use cases of this. And the main thing is, wait a minute, you can help us improve our efficiency, right? Save us time by improving our efficiency and validating our decisioning, right? And you're doing it validating, like, so we got this governance thing. It's not just, oh, just trust me, like, and I'll use the example, like we know with Deloitte, right? They had a big problem in Australia and in Canada as well, where they just sort of published these papers, and it was it was providing references that didn't even exist. You know what I mean? And
Yeah. They
taking
were
it just
using
on that.
ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and it's like, again, to kind of simplify what you just said, is the true benefits are pretty evident, which is one, AI does regulatory work and pattern checking and fact checking way better than a human can ever do. So there's efficiency gain there. Now it frees up your time for your employees to work on something else. And then because of the way the system is built up, you have actual data and proof verifiable in court. And you're, if push comes to shove and things do go awry, your excuse and rebuttal is, well, I used ChatGPT and it told me it was okay. Like that doesn't fly, right? And actually in the sense too of, I know many people in highly regulation industries and finance and real estate and all of these where they're specifically told not to use ChatGPT or not to use these systems because of data privacy and whatnot. But they're doing it anyways. Humans don't care. They're going to do it anyways, right?
Absolutely. And that's the thing too. Just two things you touched on. The privacy part is very important, right? And the other part is, so 20 to 25% of the time, right, these models are hallucinating, right? They're actually coming up with just junk, right? They're just coming up with crazy ideas and just filling in the gaps. And they're very good at that because that they're trying to be efficient. So all of a sudden now, so you're relying on this part there, right? So that's fine. You might be like, whatever, I'll let it fly. It's good. It sounds good and stuff like that. But then you end in this predicament. So you can sort of say, I can get, ChatGPT or anything else like that to give me those results. And absolutely you can. But then when you come to the point where in big enterprise, I'm talking about, the little operator down the road, but I'm talking at an enterprise level, all of a sudden you're starting to provide information or things that become regulatory requirements. It could be a matter of a word or a missing of a word and stuff like that. And that word could mean the difference between how you're interpreting that now if it comes to financing, right? Sort of saying it's a debt or it's actually a fee, right? Those little things like that, just that for us, it means it's fine, you know what I mean? It's a fee, a payment, whatever it is, the same thing, right? But all of a sudden, that could be interpreted from the regulatory perspective. SEC, ASIC, doesn't matter, can turn around and go, wait a minute, that's breach. And now you're in this regulatory space. So are you still going to be comfortable relying on that? And the other part you sort of touched on was the privacy. The way the system is set up, right? And this is purposely engineered. This is just is that it sets sovereign to every entity or enterprise or every customer that takes on the product. We set it as sovereign. So we don't actually have access to the data. You basically get your own custom Civitas ecosystem agent that evolves to your organization. It also absorbs your operational procedures and your tone idiolect of how your language and that, your company speaks. So it'll know and it shapes between that. We're not interested in, evolving our bigger agent system. That's not the objective. Our objective is providing the opportunity to giving governed, safe opportunity to AI systems. You might use an API model, you might use your own AI system, no problem, but providing that assurance that your AI system is governed and aligned to your requirements in your organization, that when the regulators do come knocking and asking you about how you came up with this decision or how it went down this rabbit warren, you can't just turn around and go, well, because that's how things going to move into space now is, things like, ChatGPT, blame it on the AI. But the buck can't stop there, right? We had the same problem with cybersecurity. And everybody was like, not interested. All boards were like, I'm not interested. In Australia, they changed the rules. I said, okay, no worries. If you're a director of a company and there's a cyber breach, you're liable as the director, as a company director. All of a sudden, globally, the industry blew up, and this is what's happening now. You can't turn around and go, it was ChatGPT or it was Claude or it was Gemini that gave me the information. What are you going to go and sue Google? Are you going to go and sue OpenAI?
That's your decision. That's your choice, and you're in trouble, right? Yeah. It's been, of course, what we did as usual. I was like, yeah, we'll talk for like 45, 50 minutes, hour max. We're at a 1 hour and 22 minutes. My little man is gonna wake up here soon, but I want like this. I was excited for this, but this is excited why we're gonna do this other podcast. Is we're gonna, I mean, I didn't even announce anything. We have close to 40 people watching, and I didn't announce anything. We just kind of went live. So I know there's people that have been here from the beginning that are interested in what we're talking about, and Adam and I are gonna start doing. We're going to come up with a cadence and we're going to start talking about all of the incredible things that are happening in the space, people that we're working with and interfacing with. And then kind of this lab side that he mentioned in the beginning is there's this concept around what he's doing too, is how do we formulate our own Google Labs and test out new theories and new products and new ideas within this ecosystem. Before we start shutting it down, though, I was really excited to talk about kind of 2026 and things that are at top of mind for you. I can talk about some things that I'm interested in too, but since you're the guest, I obviously want to let you start off by, let's just have an open discussion for the next 5 to 10 minutes about 2026 AI, what you're excited about, what you're nervous about, and we'll start winding it down, man.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm very excited about the evolution, and the top topic is that, governance is becoming the really important, and not in the governance and like that. It's more about safety, right?
Yeah.
So we started off with the whole ethical AI, and that was the objective, and that got dwindled, and then all of a sudden safety sort of popped up, and that was sort of end of 25, and we moved into 26, and now it's become the top sort of thread. I'm very excited that that is becoming the top thread, and I'm excited to see that it evolves, because that's going to make our space bigger. You know, the technology is going to evolve in the right path. You know what I'm saying? Going down the path there. I think that's a really cool one. The other one I think is really interesting too is we have moved beyond, you know, and I was thinking this morning, it's almost like we're moving, I'm going to call it we're in Web 4.0. Web 3 died, and you know, it was a hype phase. And why I say that is because we're in a pre sort of post AI web space, right? Where AI is writing content, it's producing content, it's managing stuff, and all of a sudden that's just moving into this Web 4.0 part, and you'll use elements of Web 3.0 blockchain and transability, because we need to have that. So I think that evolution, to see the explosion of how that's going to come about, is really cool. And my third sort of where I'm excited in the sort of predicting space is to, and even for our own internal, our own lab, and what we're sort of trying to achieve is to see the not explosion, but the evolution of the technology now beyond the, hey, I've just created this AI wrapper and stuff, more about solving really complex problems, right? To sort of saying, this is cool. And that now opens bigger discovery to what we can achieve as
mathematics and physics and medicine and all of these things, right? Like things that it can figure out that the human brain, it might just be a little too big for, right?
Yeah.
You said something interesting though, is like, so I think if you're into the space and you're listening to the news, it's agentic this, agentic that. The 2026 is the true year of the agents. This is when we're going to see the business impact. But you're also now seeing a lot of safety and governance. Is the safety and governance a byproduct of like, holy shit, these agents that are now human capable and are starting to do human tasks? Is it because of policy? Is it because of world politics? What are your thoughts there as to why these two topics seem to be the hottest topics right now? And I think me and you do agree that will continue to be hot topics throughout 2026. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, and this is a great question, and I'll put it to this: like, you bring in an organization, you hire a staff member, you know, you set up the first thing you want to do is make sure they're following your operational procedures, right? This is how we do things here, how we communicate, and so forth, and blah 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 blah. All of a sudden, you've got that happen, right? And you can have governance over them because you can see what they're doing. Now, all of a sudden, you're bringing into an organization, you're bringing in agents to automate those processes, which is beautiful, right? Okay, so save headcount, and then they're following through this sort of sausage machine. And I go back to the cooking HACCP pipeline. The realizations come back to say, whoa, this is really cool. They can do all this. But wait a minute. How do we know that they're doing exactly what I want them to do and is aligned to the compliance and requirements of the company and the organization, and hence where that safety comes in, right? So like we have work safe sort of parameters, you know, so people don't hurt themselves, right? Like, you know, wet sign floors and stuff. And so it's, for me, it's coming to that place, and all of a sudden we're like agentic AI, and we're going to, all these people throwing in, and you know, they're trying to prospect all these enterprise organizations, but as you and I know, enterprise organizations is very slow and antiquated. It's like, I need proof to know that this is going to work through properly. And unless you can provide that reassurance, right, that, you know, you've been validated, security certifications, but not only that, prove to me that what this agent is doing inside my organization, not saving me time, saving time and money is good, but we're beyond that now. We prove that it saves me time and money. Prove to me that it's actually safe and aligns with what I need in the organization. I'm not going to end up in court or in front of Congress, right? That is where nobody's really thought. They're thinking about it now. It's kind of an afterthought, and I think that's the part is going to really accelerate. It's already accelerated. It's not. It's going to accelerate at an exponential rate.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why.
Because of just purely agents now are doing work, or is there anything else there? Is it as simple as that? Like AI, like Last year, I felt like I heard AI agent all year, but like no one was really making. There were people, but like from a majority perspective, agents weren't just quite there yet. Now we think they are, and safety and governance are an issue because they're like, oh shit, jobs will be starting to be replaced by the end of this year.
Yeah, well, it's like we've had two parts, right? So they've brought in agents, and they can see like, first is, can the agent do what I needed to do, right?
Right.
Yes, it can. We've proven that. That's it's done. It's like we invented the car, and then we were like, oh, okay, cool. We better put lines on the road. Oh, we better put stop signs, right? And all of a sudden, we're like, okay, 70 years later, let's go and put seatbelts, right? So it's kind of like, but we've moved and accelerate. It's like, can the agent do what I needed to do? Yes, it's done. It's proven that in that space. Cool. That's awesome. Tick, tick, tick. Okay. Next question comes back to, as a human behavioral thing, you just sort of think, is this safe? Right? Is this safe? Is this going to, am I going to let a monster run wild? Right? Because you just wouldn't let your staff employee run wild in the space anyway. So that becomes that part there. And that's where it's the assurance to saying, hey, wait a minute, you've given me the solution, but how do I know, besides you telling me, yeah, man, it's safe, it's good, don't worry, just trust me, bro? That's not going to cut it, right? That just doesn't think. So I think that is the fundamental core, right? That everybody's realized now, organizations saying, cool, the pilot's showing that it can work, but how do I know it's safe? How do I know that this is going to, produce what I know every time and give me what I need? And it's proven because some organizations sacked the whole workforce, right? In Australia, I think it was Commonwealth Bank was probably the most famous one globally. They wiped out the whole call center. And then credit to the CEO, called it back and said, look, we got it wrong. We jumped the gun, right? And so we had to roll it back because it didn't solve the problem as fast as they had. And so then there's that reversal. So, okay, so we jumped in too quick. We saw a solution, but we didn't account for, the variables and then again the safety parameters. So all of a sudden that opens that whole thing, and that's the main part. I think is the reason why we've gone beyond the capability part. So
Here's the question, and I think this is what everyone's trying to figure out. What does sacking the whole call center by the end of this year happen, and is it a real reality? Like, are we there by the end of 2026? For real?
Whoa, for real? I think, that's a big question. If you don't actually have the governance systems in place to validate your basically the agent's decisions, right, and also allowing the AI systems to account for variable equations and stuff, like a variable situations. No, I don't think I don't know. Even if we did, I'd say, okay, I would say 80% of the workforce would be replaced by the end of 26. I think it will bleed into 27 only because we don't actually have the intelligence, right, to sort of facilitate that sort of counter argument. The only one that's probably actually have closest technology is Google and probably Microsoft. And why I say is Google, I don't know if people remember, it was a while ago now, but when Google released their agent that you can have conversation and it would make appointments for you and stuff. Now that sort of got pushed to the shelf, right, because it was too early in the game. They bring that now into Gemini, right, all of a sudden, and that's able to make conversations and stuff. There's your call center system. But they're only one organization, right? So you've got to now compete with others, and then so do they open that out? Do they do something? I don't know. We don't know, right? And Microsoft's got some technology like that as well. So
but from a technical perspective, by the end of 2026, the actual capabilities of AI, throw away regulation, corporations moving slow. Where are we at? AI can do 100% of human jobs, 80, not human jobs. We're talking about white collar desk, like a majority of what US is made up, service economy stuff, right? Where are we at percentage wise of AI really being able to do that from an agentic perspective?
80%, 75 to 80%. fully, yeah, 75 to 80%, with a full efficiency, like not those
As
pilot
good as
stuff.
humans or better.
It's probably better than humans. Yeah, 75 to 80%. I would say we're at that capacity. Yeah.
I'd agree, and it's just a wild thought to think. Last fun question, and then we'll wind it down. Does a novel new discovery from AI, things that a human is really not thinking about in science and math or physics or medicine, be produced by the end of the year? Or has it had happened in 9 days in January and I just haven't read about it?
Without, I'm going to say yes. And only because this is just some stuff we're working on in the lab as well behind the curtains. To doing that, where we're pushing beyond the bounds, because it's allowing the ability to explore opportunities, right, in a explosive context, right, even though it's governed bound. So yes, I'm going to say yes. There's going to be some stuff. Now, will it be published? Will it be released out? I don't know, but yes, and I think it's probably already has.
I'm not saying commercially viable, but actually, it's already done that, right? Now it's commercially viable. Like new material science. I think I read they did a version of copper that it can withstand insane heat loads where copper breaks down, and it's in essence a new material, right? So it is doing it. But I think maybe the question is, do we see a handful of them, and being, because right now, if you're not deep into it, you don't know anything about this, right? Like, do we see the narrative by the end of the year of like, oh my God, AI cracked X? Do we see that by the end of the year? You say yes. I think I'll say yes to that too.
Yeah.
Last fun question. I had a good one here. Oh my gosh, what was it? Damn it. I had such a good question, man. I lost it. I don't know. Do you have one for me? Do you have a prediction? Do you have a question to predict for me?
Yeah. Okay. So let's say we reach this point where we're 80% efficiency in replacing the, obviously human tasks and stuff, and we crack a big, the AI system cracks some big problems, right? Not talking mathematics. That's going to be some mathematical problems. I'm talking about just different conceptual thinkings, like more efficiency in fuel efficiency or something like that. Right? Like, I guess, what do you think the world will look like by the end of 26 if we achieve those milestones, that marker? What do you think it's going to look like?
I think I agree with, if you listen to the experts talk about this, actually just listen to hate them or love them, the dudes at the forefront having conversations that most people will never have. Elon Musk, they just talked to the Moonshot guys for 2.5 hours. And they all universally agreed, and I agree with the sentiments. The next 3 to 5 years are going to be tough. And there's going to be some bumps on the roads. But the hopes which is bumps to the road comes to job loss, governments not catching up with regulation in time, inappropriate young photos from Grok coming out. Unfortunately, people committing suicide over these things. I just read a story about a lady either in Japan or China that canceled her engagement to marry her AI companion. Like, crazy shit like that is going to happen. And the people that are not in the know are going to, like, my question is, I think you hear this narrative, and I'll actually push back on you as I'm giving you an answer, is right now the narrative is from these corporations are AI is the reason why we're not hiring or laying people off. And I think that, and then you have another narrative is like, actually, that's not the case. The real reason why we're having this stagnation is worry about the economy. The world's crazy. And people overhired because of COVID because they had massive checks, and this is what they thought was the right move. So actually none of this is AI impacted, but by the end of 2026, job loss and impact in people's wallets will actually start being hurt by AI. I think that is where I think there's going to be, I think the technology is moving faster, and I think the narrative of, oh, humans will adapt and more jobs will be created is absolutely wrong. I think more jobs will be lost than created because it's moving so fast. And I think there is going to be, maybe not by the end of 2026, well, maybe by the end of 2026, definitely by 2027, there will be for some form of social unrest. And I don't know what that looks like. I hope it's not extreme. But I think there will be a bump. And I think it comes in the form of either social unrest, a cyber security attack that actually does do some damage. And it's just going to be a byproduct of moving too quick. I don't think there's any physical way to avoid that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's, and I'm going to use the sort of Jeffrey Hinton and Stuart Russell sort of analogy there. I think we've got about a 20% chance that we can deviate that. 80% I agree with you. 20% we can deviate that, and in that context, that we can come collectively together. And I'll use the example back of COVID, right? COVID, for better or worse, whatever it is, it caused the world to shut down, right? And we came together collectively. And if something like that happens and we come together collectively and come to an agreement point, I think we can potentially come to a better consensus versus our egos, right, and our political sort of agendas, and bring that together and create that. I don't know. That's a very slim chance. But I think it goes back to, and even,
man, and you have to have that glass half full, man.
Yeah. So that's just to say, I'm hopeful of that, and I think if we move towards that general consensus of we're creating something that is governed, aligned, and directive there, then all of a sudden that creates the opportunity to create more creativity, right? So it's kind of like using the technology for our intuition. So if we're reducing jobs, right, then we've got more time to be creativity. And this is Elon's philosophy, right? We're kind of like giving people more space to be creative, and they're going to have more time on their hands to do a lot more things and explore a lot more things and so forth, right? And that's fine, and that's exciting, right? But those things then create opportunities. So those opportunities then create a whole new industry. So in that transition, I agree with you, it's going to be bump, but it's going to be it's either going to be a slow bump or it's going to be a quick bump, right? But also too, the bump determines the path on the road. So I'm not saying there's not going to be a bump. I'm just saying the bump could be in the other part where we move to being able to be more creative, and then the creativity will evolve as a society that creates a whole new industry, almost like another industrial age or a completely different age. We're in the digital age, but what does that now evolve? It's like, sure, it could be space. We're going space exploration. That's accelerating at a huge pace now. It could be repairing the earth, the sort of scarred earth. Like, there's some opportunities there. There's so many sort of things that we can look at that we haven't had time to do, right? But now providing the resources to do that. Now, how do you offset that with the economical side of things? And that's the part that becomes the tricky part. And that's where I sort of said that collective come together, right? This is a global UN sort of collective. They come together and find an economic way to facilitate that. And I know one of the sort of things, like, giving the ability to computing credits or whatever it is to use this technology to further advance and come up with new innovative ideas, right? So that's what I'm saying. So I think this is the opportunity of that, but it's just a bump that we take. Are we taking the right, the left, or the right? I don't know. 80% says we're going to go down the right, and it's going to be a real long, hard road because that's just history has just led that path. Yeah. But 20% we could actually bump in the other direction, and that would need to be at the expense, unfortunately, at the expense of a global event that would cause everybody to stop, right? Yeah. And that's a scary thought, but it'll also bring a wake-up call to say, okay, how do we recorrect this? Not stop this? How do we recorrect this? And how do we use this for our good? For
And
our,
that's why we're here, brother. We're trying to do that the right way. Okay, last fun question, then I really have to go.
Yeah.
Now, you can dissect this in a lot of ways, right? You could say enterprise-wide, public consumer-wide, but I will say, what is the public consensus by the end of 2026 on who is winning the race to AGI? Is it Google? Is it X? Is it Meta, who is in clear last place right now? ChatGPT or Anthropic? Who do you pick? Who do you bet on?
Google. I'm putting my money on Google.
You know, I'm going to say Google. I'm conflicted. I'm conflicted between these three. X, ChatGPT, and Google. Here, so I'll give you an argument for everyone. Google, because it's Google. They created the internet, right? They have everybody's data. They bought DeepSeek a long time ago. They have been in AI way before most people. They have the infrastructure, they have the data, they have the talent, they have the money. They're building the data centers. That would be my gut to say they will be leading. What they just did with Gemini 3, to scare ChatGPT with a multimodal thing that's just phenomenal. That will be my top dog. ChatGPT, I did not realize how much money Microsoft has invested in ChatGPT. And ChatGPT, for one reason of Sam Altman has made it clear that he is hell-bent on AGI. And Stargate will be starting. Parts of it are already up and running, but that's going to be one of the world's largest data centers ever created. And by the end of 2026, it'll be being pretty operational. The wild card for me is Elon, in the sense that what he did to bring Grok to where it was from being last in the race to the short amount of time he did was unbelievable. And the fact that he is vertically integrated. So I have a Tesla, man. I press a button and it leaves my driveway and will park in my destination, right? I went to my buddy's house. He lives on a gravel road up this little hill, end of a cul-de-sac. His house was the destination. It went up this gravel road to the cul-de-sac, looked at his driveway, which was like pretty small, 3 cars parked, and there was one space left, and it went into that space and parked. I did not touch the steering wheel once. From there, like, that's another thing to me is like, how do you guys not interpret, like, I have a car that I don't have to think about, that I have fully, because I've seen it evolve since 2020. So I'm in one of the few use cases that have seen the whole autonomous thing. Like, I had self-driving before, like you were buying self-driving, it didn't even exist, right?
Yeah.
And not till 2 months ago did this full version exist. So it has taken a 5-year evolution. So I've seen it from day one. It's unbelievable. And I 100% trust the whole thing because I was able to see that evolve. He has that data for decades. He's building robots now, and he's building the data centers, and he's building starships to build data centers in space, and he's fully integrated. I don't know how you compete with that. Like, that's the only thing that could, that's the only thing that could be the Google killer in my mind.
So outside of that, right? If we're talking, and just two parts. So in that, as far as enterprise level, there, I think Google XAI, but he's going up for a different place, right? He's going up for a different place. So if we put in that there, I would put his next to that. If we're having this sort of wrap there, I'd say NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA's got a lot of information. Apple, don't write Apple off because the next part is the infrastructure, right? Apple can jump in there, right? And so that's that part there. As far as getting to AGI, I mean, I'm comfortable to say within before 26 has ended, we will actually have a governed AGI unit. Civitas will be a governed AGI system. I'm happy to make that.
AGI is here, buddy.
That's
AGI
it.
is here, people, and they were predicting 2035. Then it went down to 2030, and guess what? We are in the beginning of 2026, and I have a person that has built a system that is capable of AGI and says that system will be ready to go by the end of this year.
Yep.
2035 turned to 2026. If that cannot convince you all that we are accelerating beyond belief and we probably are in the singularity, I don't know what else to tell you, people. It's happening at light speed, and you all need to re listen to this conversation. You need to follow Adam. You need to follow Mikey, and you need to follow my LinkedIn because I do a lot of content on LinkedIn now, too. I bring on tech entrepreneurs like Adam every week. We have deep, meaningful conversations. Adam and I are going to start a series based on just AI in general and what we're thinking about from the lab's perspective and the things that we can whip up, knowing that we have access to what will be an AGI system based on governance, which is probably one of the people in my mind that you want to be covering. Adam, where do you want people to follow you? LinkedIn and X, how can they find you? Do they want them to go to a website? Do you want them to email you? I'll give you a chance to kind of sign off and say how to, if they were fascinated by this conversation, because I'll put this up on my regular podcast platform too. How do they get a hold of you, man?
Yeah, just firstly, thank you everybody for sort of listening in. Thank you, Mike, for the opportunity to sort of communicate and share, and it's been really lovely. And for me, it's just building a bigger part of the family. It's look, this is this ecosystem. As far as finding me, I'm on LinkedIn. I really don't have any other sort of social platforms. You can find it on the website. It's spqrtech.ai. And just reach out and say hello and talk if you want to share ideas. Maybe occasionally I'm floating around in some Discord chat rooms if Mikey's invited me in there. But otherwise, like I said, I'm very open to communicating, discussing, sharing. You want to know more about the papers, talk about some nerd stuff, all into that. I think it's really exciting because I'm very big about we can't do this alone, right? So sort of built it to the base point. It's like, evolving that and bringing in different perspectives. So yeah, come and find me, come and say hello, and happy to break bread.
And when I put the podcast up, I'll have all your information to contact. Brother, it's Bubble and I were talking about this earlier. It's crazy. Like, you worked, me personally, you yourself, you work so hard at things for so long and you get so frustrated and you have failures and you have ups and downs. Every day that goes by, it just seems like all of the opportunities are pouring on us now. And 2026 is a perfect year to be promoting what we're promoting, which is AI safety, governance, doing things the right way, and genuine human connection. They all wrap into one beautiful package. And Adam and I are going to be at the heart of that entire year. So we love you all. So much love to you, Adam. Beautiful conversation. Of course, you kept me almost 2 hours. Little man needs to get up, but this was amazing. Mikey G and Adam, love you all. We will see you next time. Stay tuned for when we are going to have our podcast series lined up, but expect more of beautiful conversations like this. We are